All right, thank you, Kevin. My name's Lee Altadonna. I'm president of the Wyncote Audubon Society. I usually would be in a live in-person meeting in our main meeting, hosting some business that we would be traditionally doing. But again, as this year has gone, we will be remaining virtual right through the remainder of this season, and we hope to be in person next season. But what business we typically do will be done online, and there are two pieces of business that are important for our members. One will be elections. We had a great nominating committee that included Wendy Clymer, Margaret Rohde, and Rich Conroy, and they have put together a slate of officers, and they've also nominated directors, 6 folks in the class of 2024, 1 person in the class of 2023. And really great news, we have another candidate that we call a youth representative. They're not, because they're under 18, able to be a formal director, but we enjoy having the youth perspective on our board. For officers, I have been renominated as president. Sherry Kreider will be nominated as vice president. Connie Sanchez, our treasurer, and Wendy Clymer is our secretary. Everybody here has continued and are eligible to run again, with the exception of Rich Conroy, who was.
Yeah.
Yep. Please mute. But Rich Conroy is stepping down as vice president, but will remain on our board. He will be nominated in the class of 2024. Along with Connie, Wendy, Sherry, and me, and very pleased to welcome Neely Shaw, who will be an incoming director in the class of 2024. We're also pleased that Katie Eberhardt is going to be nominated for the class of 2023 in an open slot. And as I said previously, Maddie Singer will be our youth representative. She's a student at Abington Friends School, new birder, and really a quite active young person. So you look for that. We're also going to be adopting new bylaws. I know this has been highlighted in past Naturally newsletters. You'll be getting a notification of both the elections and the bylaws, so you can view them online, and we'll be asking folks online to either approve or not support the recommended bylaws. I also now want to turn to some exciting news. We conducted our birdathon. We had the Swifts team out in the field again. This was the very last day of April and May 1st, a 24-hour period. And the team tied for first place for the number of species seen. We had a great number of people on the team that were working different parts of the area. Tonight's speaker, Keith Russell, was an important part of the team as well, and helped us tally some birds that were not seen by other team members. So that was great. There's still an opportunity to support the birdathon. All the funds being raised in this year's birdathon are going to be used to support the Bird Safe Philly effort. Wyncote Audubon is a major partner of the group that has formed Bird Safe Philly. And we're able, with funds that are being contributed, to do a number of things to help this. And after you see Keith's presentation, you'll understand how important it is to get support for the birdathon. You can make your contribution online, or if you received an envelope in the mail, you can return the envelope with a contribution. One other announcement. One of the things that we are involved with Bird Safe Philly is a very interesting partnership with a group called Fresh Artists. They have put together a program with art teachers and students from around the region, includes Camden, Norristown, other suburban districts, but quite a few of the Philadelphia schools. And these students produced bird art that was inspired by Fuertes and also by George Armistead, and I believe another photographer as well, to inspire them to try to draw some birds to help bring attention to the issue of bird collision. And it's going to be a major exhibit of the work, along with a panel about Bird Safe Philly and about techniques you can use to mitigate bird collision at the Philadelphia Flower Show. There's going to be tens of thousands of people that will pass through in this first time outdoor venue at FDR Park for the Flower Show. And we are really pleased that we can be a part of that. We are looking for volunteers to get a free ticket and spend a half day at the exhibit to just be an ambassador for Bird Safe Philly and to help the Fresh Artists team welcome people to view the exhibit. If you are interested, look for another Naturally to come out next week, or contact me at Wincote Audubon Society at gmail.com. That's right on our website. You can contact us via email. And the last thing I want to announce is we have a bonus meeting this year. The first meeting we had canceled in March of 2020 was one that was going to be presented by Judy Stepanowski and her work with the peregrines and documenting them at St. John the Baptist Church in Roxborough. And she's going to be presenting that program. There's a major change, though. This is going to be the first Friday in June, June 4th, and it will be at 7 p.m., a half hour earlier. So I believe it's already on Eventbrite. You can register. I know the number of people have already registered for the program, but we would encourage people to see Judy's program. Her work has been highlighted in the Philadelphia Inquirer and elsewhere, and I think you'll enjoy the program. So they're the limit of my announcements. There'll be more to come. You can check if you're on our email list for the Naturally and for our updates. You will receive more information, all the items I've talked about. So with that, Kevin, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and very pleased for us to be able to proceed with the meeting.
Thank you, Lee. And if anyone wanted to register for that June 4th program, I put the link to register on Eventbrite in the chat box. So while I'm doing my intro, you guys can listen and register for that program. So tonight, I'm very happy to present Keith Russell. Keith is the program manager for urban conservation for Audubon, Pennsylvania. Based in Philadelphia, he works on a variety of bird conservation issues, including bird collisions with man-made structures, birds and nocturnal lights, non-native plants, and migration stopover habitat. He is also a research associate of the Academy of Natural Sciences of Drexel University, and he has received a number of awards, including the 2016 American Birding Association's Ludlow Griscom Award for Outstanding Contributions to Regional Ornithology. So we're very lucky to have someone as experienced and kind of well known in this field as Keith Russell. And he's going to present the bird collision problem in Philadelphia, a historical perspective. Thank you very much, Keith.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So the problem of birds colliding with buildings, is one that most of us in the birding world have now become familiar with, especially since the 1990s, and one that many people outside the birding world have also become aware of in recent years. But this is a problem that was first described almost 200 years ago. And after it was described, our understanding of the problem grew rather slowly, mainly because the things that cause birds to collide with buildings weren't nearly as common before the 1970s as they are today. And interestingly, some of the most important information that was learned about the problem before the 1970s came from Philadelphia. So, just a second. So I'm having a problem advancing my slides. Not sure why. Okay, thanks. This is due to the fact that the study of ornithology in the New World was centered in Philadelphia throughout the 18th and 19th centuries and highlighted by names like the Finnish explorer and naturalist Peter Kalm, the English naturalists John and William Bartram that we're very familiar with here in Philly, the Scottish ornithologist Alexander Wilson, and of course, John James Audubon, along with the American naturalist John Cassin and Whitmer Stone. And Philadelphia's place as a center for ornithological studies was further cemented by the formation of the Charles Wilson Peale Philadelphia Museum in 1786 and the Academy of Natural Sciences in 1813. So the work that was conducted by these early naturalists and natural history institutions led to the discovery of many new species of birds in Philadelphia, including the barred owl, the blue-headed vireo, marsh wren, whippoorwill, cerulean warbler, and others, and also led to many other interesting discoveries about birds, including what may be the earliest description of a bird interacting with glass in North America. And it's interesting, it's an interesting fact that was actually uncovered by Matt Haley, who found it in the archives of the historic Wick House in Germantown section of the city. So according to an entry recorded in the diary of a Philadelphia resident named Reuben Haynes III, dated October 30th, 1805, Mr. Haynes described finding a yellow bird in the window at Pennsylvania Hospital, which he subsequently showed to Alexander Wilson. And specifically, he wrote that he went with Joseph H. to the Penn Hospital in the garden in the greenhouse, and he caught a yellow bird in the window, and he put it in, he said he put it in my hat and took it to Benjamin Marshall's, let it fly about the room, and then took it to Alexander Wilson's after letting the children see it, set it at liberty, stayed to tea. So that's what happened in 1805. So we don't know what species the yellow bird was, or whether it had collided with the greenhouse glass or simply entered the greenhouse and begun fluttering around against the window. But the bird appeared to have been a bird that was just confused by the glass, but to not have perhaps suffered any serious injuries. So while birds were probably interacting with glass regularly in the US throughout the early part of the 19th century, the first report of a bona fide collision with glass didn't occur until the 1830s, when Thomas Nuttall published a report of a sharp-shinned hawk that actually crashed through 2 panes of glass in a greenhouse at the Cambridge Botanical Garden, only to be stopped by a 3rd pane. And John Townsend described 5 fatal collisions with glass, all involving yellow-billed cuckoos. Interestingly, Townsend attributed these collisions, which he had described as tragedies, to what he believed to be abnormal, incompetent, self-destructive behavior on the part of the individuals involved, and behavior contrary to that of most other birds. So Philadelphia's position as a center for ornithological studies would also lead to the formation of the Delaware Valley Ornithological Club in 1890. And during its formative years, the DVOC happened to take a special interest in documenting the migration patterns of birds, as well as the presence of birds in urban areas. So having these 2 interests really allowed the DVOC to begin documenting a second issue that can cause birds to collide with buildings, and one that was just beginning to become more prevalent during the late 19th century. And that issue was the effect that electric lights had on birds migrating at night. So the first example that appears to have been documented of a bird colliding with a building in Philadelphia because of electric lights occurred on August 28, 1897, when a soarer was found dead on City Hall Tower, almost 2 months after lights on the new tower had been turned on for the very first time on July 4th of that year. And the person who found the soarer wondered why such a strange bird would have come all the way to the tower to die, and reported the finding to the Evening Bulletin, which, for anyone who may not be old enough to know, was one of Philadelphia's main newspapers until 1982. And fortunately, the Bulletin published a story, which allowed it to come to the attention of the DVOC. And the DVOC then arranged to have City Hall's chief electrician, a man ironically named Mr. Slaughter, and his staff to begin monitoring the tower, along with the nearby roofs and court area below the tower, for dead and injured birds on a daily basis during periods. So in addition to retrieving dead and injured birds, the weather conditions associated with each collision event were also recorded. And remarkably, this work constituted what was probably the first collision monitoring study ever conducted in North America. So by the end of 1899, 527 individual birds involving 56 species have been documented colliding with City Hall Tower, but a whopping 452 of these collisions had occurred during a 9-week period between August 23rd and October 31st in 1899. And in a paper that was read before the 17th Congress of the American Ornithologists Union in November of 1899 by DVOC founder William Bailey, Mr. Bailey described the collisions that have been documented at City Hall and noted that the unusually large number recorded during the fall of 1899 had actually coincided with the addition of some unusually bright lights that had been placed around the tower temporarily for an event called the Industrial Exhibition. And here they are. This assemblage of lights certainly appears to have been brighter than any lights that illuminate City Hall today. And of the large number of collisions that have been observed during that time, Mr. Bailey wrote, and I quote, "Special illumination on the tower and several very stormy nights were responsible for the unusual numbers." So by 1899, the DVOC had used monitoring to figure out two basic facts about the bird collision problem. Specifically, that artificial light at night can cause nocturnally migrating birds to fly into buildings, and that this phenomena is more likely to occur during periods of stormy weather. In general, the collisions documented by the DVOC at City Hall during the 1890s were some of the earliest observations ever made in the US of birds being attracted to artificial light at night that was not emanating from a lighthouse. It's also interesting to compare the types and numbers of birds that collided with City Hall during the 1890s with the types and numbers of birds that have collided with buildings in downtown Philadelphia today. While both lists contain a large variety of species, both lists are dominated by warblers. And while the 5 species found in the largest numbers between 1897 and 1899 included 158 common yellowthroats, 67 northern parullas, 34 yellow-rump warblers, 26 palm warblers, and 24 black-throated green warblers. The 5 species found in the largest numbers during a collision monitoring study conducted in Center City from 2008 to 2011 included 106 ovenbirds, 61 white-throated sparrows, 43 common yellowthroats, 27 black and white warblers, and 20 northern parullas. One of the interesting differences between these two lists, of course, is the fact that yellow-rump warblers collided with City Hall Tower in numbers greater than most other species during the 1890s, but this species is rarely recorded colliding with buildings in downtown Philadelphia today, despite the fact that it's the most numerous migratory warbler in the Philadelphia area. Also interesting is the fact that the ovenbird and white-throated sparrow are the species recorded colliding with buildings in downtown Philadelphia in the largest numbers today, but only 1 ovenbird and only 7 white-throated sparrows were found between 1897 and 1899, despite the fact that monitoring was conducted then during periods when migrating ovenbirds and white-throated sparrows should have been present in significant numbers. The reports from City Hall from 1901 to 1903 indicate that collisions continued to occur regularly there throughout the spring and fall, and several new species were found during this period, including an American robin and a blue jay. These were considered noteworthy finds at the time because neither species was believed then to migrate at night. But one of the things that bird collision monitoring has demonstrated over the years is that some species that were thought to only migrate during the day can also migrate at night, and that some species believed to be non-migratory actually exhibit some migratory behavior. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. Although the DVOC published reports of bird collisions at City Hall from 1901 through 1903, after 1903, the DVOC only published 2 additional reports of this type, and that occurred in 1915 and 1948. And the succession of annual reports after 1903 may have been due to the fact that Mr. Slaughter and his staff appear to have ceased their daily monitoring efforts after that year. But in an article published by the Philadelphia Ledger In 1904, Mr. Slaughter was quoted as having said that almost 2,000 birds have been found dead at the tower since 1897, and that of the thousands of birds that pass close to the lights, only a few actually strike the building. So the next report, published by the DVOC in 1915, provided details about a major collision event that occurred at City Hall that year on the night of May 21st, 22nd. And this report also summarized major collision events that occurred later that year on October 17th, 18th, and a decade earlier on August 28th, 1905. According to the report's author, Delos Culver, the scene on May 22nd was appalling, with dead and injured birds lying everywhere in the court and areaways below the tower, as well as on the building's roof. Although 320 birds were identified by Mr. Culver, many others had already been removed by the time he arrived at the scene. And one interesting insight made by this report was the fact that while the largest number of birds continued to collide with City Hall Tower on stormy nights, almost none occurred during heavy rain, and at least one collision event that involved 29 birds representing 12 species had occurred on a relatively clear night on which the only contributing weather factor may have been a very light fog that became evident towards daybreak. Also noted in this report was the fact that while the common yellowthroat and northern parula were still the most numerous collision victims, at least on the night of May 21st, 22nd in 1915, no yellow-rump warblers were found that night, despite the fact that, and I quote, the species was at the time quite common throughout the country. Despite this explanation, May 21st is usually a date by which yellow-rump warblers have all but completed their passage through Philadelphia. So this statement is a bit challenging to really understand. Between 1897 and 1915, no collisions appear to have been reported from any locations in Philadelphia except City Hall, which continued to be rather brightly lit throughout this period, although not as festively lit as it had been during the fall of 1899. And no subsequent collision events appear to have been documented in the Philadelphia area after 1915 until 1948, when a major event occurred on the night of September 9th and 10th. So the 1948 event was not only the first to be documented in Philadelphia in over 30 years, but it was the first time the birds have been documented colliding with a building other than City Hall, as described by articles published by the DVOC and by the Philadelphia Inquirer on the morning of September 10th. Hundreds of dead and dying birds were found around the PSFS Bank building and on its roof, and dozens of disoriented birds had also flown inside City Hall through an open window on the 4th floor, and some of these had made their way to higher floors. And the PSFS building was completed in 1932, and this postcard that we're looking at from that period shows how close the building is to City Hall. It looks a little closer on this postcard than it actually is, about a block away. But you can see that City Hall continued to be brightly lit at night during the 1930s. So the event in 1948 was attributed to a large weather system that had produced fog so widespread and so dense that it grounded planes in a number of cities along the East Coast. That night, thousands of migrating birds were reported to have also collided with the tallest buildings in New York City, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Nashville, Tennessee. As stated by Quentin Kramer, who wrote the DVOC article, beacon lights at the tops of the tallest buildings in each of these cities apparently attracted birds from the overcast. And Mr. Kramer went on to say, and I quote, that the birds died due to a rare combination of season, wind, cloud, and man-made illumination, unquote. So his article also stated that uncounted numbers of birds have been collected from the roof of the PSFS building and destroyed before they could be examined by DVOC members, but that the club did manage to salvage 206 birds, of which the most numerous species were 50 magnolia warblers, 26 American redstarts, 23 black and white warblers, 20 ovenbirds, 15 common yellow-throats, 15 black-throated blue warblers, and 13 chestnut-sided warblers. The only birds salvaged that were not warblers were 8 red-eyed vireos and a single scarlet tanager. So of interest is a fact that various unproven hypotheses about the birds having died from the intense heat emanating from building lights, radioactivity, or food poisoning were discussed in the Inquirer article. But both articles concluded that fog and lights were the most likely cause. And while the DVOC article referenced several other events in North America in which huge numbers of birds have perished in a single day from cold or other natural causes, neither the DVOC article or the Inquirer article made reference to any of the collision events that have previously been documented in Philadelphia. Why none of the people who contributed to these articles, including staff of the zoo and the Academy of Natural Sciences, the DVOC, and organizations in other cities appear to have been aware of the information previously gathered about collisions at City Hall is unclear. But this speaks to the fact that prior to the 1970s, there were really few, if any, experts that could properly interpret these events from a historical perspective. So during the second half of the 20th century, the collision problem would finally begin to get better understood by more people and recognized in more locations. And this change was due in part to the fact that collisions caused by glass increased dramatically as glass began to be used more extensively to cover the facades of new buildings. And it was also due to the pioneering research on collisions conducted by Dr. Daniel Clem at Muhlenberg College, beginning in the 1970s. And that research provided a firm scientific basis for understanding the problem. And Dr. Clem also began to place what we know about collisions in its proper historic perspective. So today, the problem of birds colliding with buildings continues to escalate as the amount of glass and artificial light at night that birds are exposed to continues to increase. And together, these two issues have caused a number of birds that collide with buildings and other types of human structures that contain glass, like sound barriers, bus shelters, and outdoor walls, to now be considered a major cause of decline in many species. So today, 365 million to 1 billion birds are estimated to die each year because of collisions with buildings and other human structures just in the US. And the recent report that estimated that the number of birds in North America had declined by 1/3 since 1970 attributed part of that decline to the bird collision problem. In fact, when you look at all the major sources of bird mortality that are caused by people, birds colliding with buildings is near the top of the list, along with predation from domestic cats, which are estimated to kill over 2.4 billion birds in the US a year. But some of the birds that cats capture include birds that have already been injured because of a collision. So here in Philadelphia, work to address the bird collision problem was for many years only conducted by the Academy of Natural Sciences, which continued to add more and more specimens of birds that have been killed by collisions to their research collection during the 1990s, further enhancing what we know about which species were colliding with buildings, where collisions were occurring locally, when they were occurring, and how they varied by sex and age. But in 2006, additional work to address the problem began when the Conservation Department of the Philadelphia Zoo invited Audubon, Pennsylvania, and the Ornithology Department of the Academy to collaborate on initiating a Lights Out program in Philadelphia. That attempt was not successful because building owners and managers that were invited to participate felt that they needed more information about the nature of the problem at the buildings they operated than was available at the time. So in response to that need, Audubon, the zoo, and the academy conducted a formal collision monitoring study in the downtown area from 2008 through 2011 in an area that included many buildings operated by members of the Building Owners and Managers Association. So that study was actually conducted in 2 locations. One location was a 3.5 square block section of Center City, west of Broad Street, more or less between 19th Street and 17th Street. And the other was on the main campus of Temple University in North Philadelphia. So through that study and subsequent monitoring, a great deal of important information was obtained about the nature and extent of the collision problem in downtown Philly, including some information that was contradictory to some conventional ideas about how collisions are supposed to occur. So perhaps most importantly, it was concluded that at least in downtown Philadelphia, collisions are now being caused more by reflective and transparent glass than by artificial light at night. But it was also concluded that artificial light at night exacerbates the problems caused by glass by making glass visible to birds at night. The results also showed that birds collide with buildings of all heights in the downtown area, including buildings that are only 1 or 2 stories high, and that a building's potential for bird collisions was determined more by the presence of glass and the influence of lights than by the building's height. So birds were not only documented colliding with buildings, but also with bus shelters, outdoor glass walls, and other smaller structures that contain reflective or transparent glass. 75 species of birds were found to have collided with buildings in the downtown area during the study, but as of 2021, this year, the total number of species known to have collided with buildings in the downtown area had risen to 105 species, and that number will certainly continue to increase. While 75% of the birds found were dead and 25% were injured, we now know that many birds injured by collisions simply die later as internal injuries they sustain worsen. Most collision victims that are seriously injured sustain head injuries that can result in brain hemorrhaging and swelling. This fact was first ascertained during the early 19th century by the DVOC as they skinned collision victims that they'd found. And it's been reconfirmed in recent years, here in Philly at least, by the Academy of Natural Sciences, which has found that the collision victims they process typically show signs of injuries to the brain and or the skull. So based on the number of individual birds found and factoring in collisions that were not detected because they occurred at times of the day or year when monitoring was not being conducted and other reasons, it was estimated that up to 1,000 collisions occur in the main study area each year. Monitoring on the main campus of Temple University indicated that birds were colliding with buildings at a high rate there as well. While it remains difficult to know how many birds collide with buildings annually throughout the city of Philadelphia as a whole, the number of collisions estimated to occur in the main study area suggests that the citywide total could be very high. So by occasionally monitoring the subroofs of tall buildings, which is something that isn't typically done in other cities, it was concluded that at least in downtown Philadelphia, birds regularly collide with tall buildings at all heights and not mainly on the lowest floors, as is widely believed. So most species appear to have collided with buildings within the main study area in a random fashion, but a few species, including the ruby-throated hummingbird and the black-polled warbler, show statistically non-random distributions, suggesting that they were colliding mainly with certain types of buildings or mainly colliding with buildings in certain parts of the study area. Red-bellied woodpeckers, tufted titmice, Carolina wrens, and white-breasted nuthatches have been recorded colliding with buildings in the main study area, suggesting that some individuals of those species may be migratory. More recently, northern cardinals, European starlings, and house sparrows have also been found that collided with buildings in the main study area, suggesting that some migratory behavior may also be occurring locally in those species. The detached heads and wings of a number of birds were found during the study, and these body parts continue to be found today, indicating that raptors regularly capture birds migrating through the downtown area. And these predations occur at night, and they are enabled by, or they occur a lot at night, not exclusively, but a lot at night. And they're enabled by nocturnal lights that allow raptors to see nocturnal migrants that would otherwise not be visible in the night sky. And this is a behavior which also occurs in other cities. And it was described as early as 1899 here in Philadelphia in an article about bird collisions at City Hall that appeared in the Philadelphia Inquirer. And in recent years, the list of migratory birds, that have been captured and eaten by raptors in the downtown area have included cuckoos, chats, woodcock, woodpeckers, meadowlarks, flickers, and even killdeer. And I should say that in addition to birds, several species of bats have been periodically found at buildings that were being monitored during the study. And the issues that cause bats to frequent downtown buildings are still not really well understood by our monitoring team, but are probably related to migratory behavior and hibernation. So the species consistently found to have collided with buildings in the largest numbers during and after the study have included the ovenbird, white-throated sparrow, common yellowthroat, black and white warbler, parula warbler, magnolia warbler, gray catbird, hermit thrush, ruby-throated hummingbird, dark-eyed junco, and American woodcock. Unexpected species found during and after the study have included ducks, shorebirds, and several species of rails. And of these, the two most unexpected finds, at least in my opinion, were probably two wild turkeys, one right outside the Temple campus, and the other one was a bird that flew through a window at the University of Pennsylvania, and a yellow rail that was found actually in a hallway in the basement of a building at Temple. It had flown down a stairwell and gone down a hallway and that was underground and turned a corner going down another hallway and smacked into a glass door at the end of the hallway. Pretty amazing. So some species that migrate through the Philadelphia area in large numbers and presumably migrate at night are rarely ever found to have collided with buildings in the downtown area, including yellow-rumped warbler, Baltimore oriole, eastern phoebe, and cedar waxwing, and reasons for this are just not clear. Although a few starlings and house sparrows have been found in the downtown area that had collided with buildings, the vast majority of house sparrows, pigeons, and starlings that occur downtown don't collide with buildings, demonstrating that birds can indeed learn to avoid collisions with glass, just like our pets, our pet dogs and cats, if they live in areas where they're exposed to glass on a daily basis. So since the 2008 to 2011 monitoring study was completed, Audubon, working in collaboration with the zoo, decided to initiate a series of projects to address the problems caused by glass rather than lights, because it had been concluded that the glass problem was more significant. And that has involved conducting educational work, as well as work to help building owners to retrofit collision-prone buildings with collision-preventing materials. And much of that work has been done at universities. And overall, this work falls under a key part of the National Audubon Strategic Plan that's designed to create bird-friendly communities by promoting the use of native plants and by promoting the creation of bird-friendly buildings designed and operated in ways that won't cause harm to birds. So work to retrofit collision-prone buildings has been accomplished primarily by placing patterns of various types on collision-prone glass surfaces. These patterns appear as barriers to birds, but they still allow people to see adequately through the windows. Locations in Philadelphia where these projects have been completed include the zoo, John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, the City View Condo, Temple University, and University of Pennsylvania. So work to raise awareness about the problem and better educate people in the Philadelphia area about how the problem can be addressed has been accomplished in a number of ways. In 2018, a permanent exhibit about the problem was completed at Heinz Refuge, and an educational presentation about how collisions occur on homes and low-rise buildings with accompanying brochures was created that is currently being given by Audubon chapters and others throughout the country. And the creation of that educational presentation was directed and funded by Wyncote Audubon and Lehigh Valley Audubon with assistance from Audubon, Pennsylvania. And the presentation focused on homes and low rises because that's where 99% of all collisions with buildings are estimated to actually occur. So Audubon, Pennsylvania also produced workshops and seminars about the problem. And this and other work to address collisions has been featured by regional newspapers, magazines, TV, radio programs, as well as blogs and podcasts. And although these educational efforts have, I guess, altogether, these educational efforts have raised awareness about the problem in ways that we believe have really inspired people in the Philadelphia area to begin addressing the problem in more substantial ways over time. So in addition to raising awareness and promoting education and retrofits, Audubon, Pennsylvania also worked with the American Bird Conservancy and local LEED members to add bird collision prevention to the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED building certification program by creating LEED Pilot Credit 55 for bird collision deterrence in 2011. And in a collaborative study that Audubon conducted with the American Bird Conservancy and Fordham University, we conducted research on the effects of artificial light at night on different colors on birds that were actively migrating through the Philadelphia area. And that was in 2012. And that research confirmed that green and blue light attract nocturnal migrants in significantly lower numbers than white light. And finally, Audubon, Pennsylvania also tried to not just talk the talk, but to also walk the walk when it comes to the bird collision problem. And this was accomplished by making the Discovery Center, which opened in 2018, and the John James Audubon Center, which opened in 2019, completely bird-friendly buildings. So rarely are buildings ever constructed from the ground up to be free of the problems that cause birds to fly into them. And Audubon is particularly proud to have created two of the small number of buildings in the US that have ever been constructed to meet this much needed standard. So at the Discovery Center, acid etched glass, hanging cords, wooden slats, and vinyl dots were all used to prevent bird collisions. And the vinyl dots were generously donated and installed by Wyncote President Lee Altadonna. And at the John James Audubon Center, perforated vinyl film was installed on the windows, and this is the same material used to place ads on buses. And in addition, the windows of the large pavilion attached to the center were covered with a clear film that has a pattern of translucent horizontal stripes that's designed to prevent collisions there. So during the fall of 2020, as restrictions associated with coronavirus pandemic began to ease, Audubon volunteer Stephen Macchiaski was once again monitoring the same section of Center City that had been monitored from 2008 to 2011, when on the night of October 1st and 2nd, during the peak of fall migration, thousands of migratory birds crashed into buildings throughout the Center City area. While collisions with glass occur in small numbers on a regular basis in many locations, collisions with glass don't typically involve hundreds of birds dying at a single building on a single day, at least here in Philadelphia. But artificial light at night can still cause collisions to occur in huge numbers at a single building on a single day. And the thousands of birds that collided with downtown buildings on October 1st and 2nd did so under the same kind of cloudy, misty weather conditions that produced mass collisions at City Hall and at the PSFS building in the past. So on October 2nd, dead and dying birds were literally everywhere. And Steve and I struggled to document that event as well as we could, which involved, among other things, collecting the bodies of as many of the dead birds as possible so they could be added to the collection at the Academy. And while other mass collision events may have occurred in Philadelphia between 1948 and 2020, that simply didn't get documented, at least by us birders. This event was clearly the first of its kind to be documented in Philadelphia since 1948. And it received a great amount of press coverage locally, nationally, and even internationally, which helped to further raise awareness about the problems that the built environment poses for the millions of birds that regularly migrate to the city. In response to this event, representatives from the Academy, the DVOC, Wyncote Audubon, Valley Forge Audubon, and Audubon, Pennsylvania, which, by the way, recently merged with Audubon, Maryland to become Audubon Mid-Atlantic. They all came together to form a group called Birds Save Philly, which we talked about earlier. And Birds Save Philly was created to allow the member organizations to use their collective strengths to advocate for changes that will better protect birds in Philadelphia from collisions. And through the efforts of Birds Save Philly, a number of things have been accomplished towards this goal since last October. The first was an op-ed that was published by the Inquirer that advocated for a Lights Out program, which is one of the best ways to prevent mass collision events from occurring in the future. Birds Save Philly then followed through and initiated a Lights Out program, which began this spring on April 1st. And the program began with broad participation from members of the Philadelphia business community, including Comcast, PECO, the Philadelphia Building Owners and Managers Association, Brandywine Realty, Liberty Property Trust, and the Building Industry Association. So Birds Save Philly is also continuing to conduct collision monitoring in the downtown area, and we expanded focus monitoring this spring to Independence National Historic Park. In addition, Birds Save Philly created a new page on the popular iNaturalist website where anyone that finds a bird that may have collided with a building in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties can document that collision, allowing us to learn more about the extent of the bird collision problem in the Philadelphia area. In April, Philadelphia City Council also issued a proclamation in support of the Birds Save Philly Lights Out program, and information about all these projects can now be found on the new Birds Save Philly website, which launched on March 11th. While birds will continue to collide with buildings throughout the Philadelphia area in the future, for the first time ever, a coordinated effort has begun to address the problem in significant ways that will also make it possible for anyone interested in the problem to help to do something about it. So while it may still take years for the collision problems caused by glass to be significantly diminished in Philadelphia, the potential for this looks brighter than at any time in the past. And the potential for another mass collision event occurring due to lights has now been reduced thanks to the Lights Out program. So I invite anyone to visit Birds Save Philly website if you haven't already done so to learn more about this most recent effort to address the collision problem locally. So to conclude, I'd like to acknowledge the generous financial support that Wyncote Audubon has provided for Birds Save Philly, as well as the leadership and technical support provided to the Birds Save Philly effort by Robin Irizarry, Judy Stepnowski, Billy Brown, Ann Becker, Linda Widup, George Armistead, Vince Smith, Tracy Cohen, Bob Peck, and Jason Weckstein, some of whom were Wyncote members. In addition, I'd also like to mention that Wyncote Audubon's own Connie Sanchez really went above and beyond the call of duty, creating the Birds Save Philly website and helping to coordinate the creation of the Lights Out program in only a few months, while also coordinating many aspects of what Birds Save Philly is doing, including overseeing the important work of communications. And I'd also like to recognize Lee Altadonna for the unflappable support and effective leadership that he's provided to oversee the entire Birds Save Philly effort from day one. And last but not least, I'd like to recognize the contributions of Stephen Macchiaski, who tirelessly monitored the downtown area for dead and injured birds 7 days a week, last fall from September 1st to November 30th, and who is currently in the midst of another Herculean effort monitoring the downtown area this spring. So without Steve's dedication and zeal, we would have little information about what's currently occurring with bird collisions in the downtown area now. And we would probably have never even been aware of the mass collision event that occurred last October. So in summary, without Steve's efforts, Bird Safe Philly would not have come into existence. So thank you, Steve, for playing the part of Abraham in all this. And like Abraham, I hope the results of your work will multiply more than the stars of the heavens. So that's the conclusion.
Oh, thank you, Keith. That was all the historical stuff. I had no idea. That's incredible. And really cool that they've been monitoring it for that long, but it's also scary that this has been a problem for that long.
Well, it's really grown in the last 50 years. And, but we have a lot of history here in Philadelphia, and it's a fascinating part of our history that this was addressed and noticed so early.
Matthew Haley, got to give him special credit. That's awesome. He dug a lot of this stuff out. I haven't got to meet him yet, but I've heard great things. And I'm also proud to be part of Wingcoat Audubon Society. I'd love to say I had anything to do with Bird Safe Philly, but no, that was mostly Lee and Connie and the others that you mentioned. So really hats off to them. That's a huge, I can't even begin to explain how big of an effort that is. So well done. That's really amazing.
Well, it's a great part of Wingcoat's legacy, the work that's been done. So hats off to Connie and Lee and all the other Wingcoat members, Rob and so Judy, that have been involved in this.
Absolutely. So I had a question, but if anyone else has questions, feel free to type them in the chat or turn your video on and we can have a discussion here. If you would, Keith, if you want to end this screen share so everybody, if they want to turn their videos on, we can see some friendly faces maybe. No, beautiful. So my question was, so besides going to Bird Safe Philly and using iNaturalist to report any sightings we may have, so I live in Montgomery County and you said surrounding counties, I assume we count. After we report that observation to iNaturalist, should we bag it up and take it to the academy, or do they not want people to do that? Do you have more information about that?
Yeah, you can bag your birds and take them to the academy, and there's instructions on iNaturalist about how to do all that.
Awesome, and I put
and
the
also,
website in the chat.
If you find an injured bird that needs care, there's also a list of rehab centers that are available to take birds to.
Awesome. My my coworkers at the Pennypack Trust, we took an injured pigeon to the Philadelphia Wildlife Metro Center just the other day. So those are all great places to go.
Yeah, we're blessed to have a bunch of places here in Philadelphia that will care for these injured animals. So they do great work.
Absolutely. And if you're looking to donate, besides Wingcoat Audubon and the others, those are also good places. That money's well spent. So thank you for that information, answering my question. I put the link to Bird Safe Philly in there, so I'll be checking that out to see how I can do stuff like that. Nylish asked, is there a similar story from other large cities?
Well, in terms of bird collisions, yeah, especially here in the eastern part of the U.S., but this happens all over. There are birds actively flying into buildings because of glass and lights. Historically, we're really unique in having all of the work that was done by the DVOC early on and things that were noticed before that. I think there's possibly other information that could be gleaned from going through, historic records and newspaper records from the 19th century about bird collisions that no one has uncovered yet. So we need more Matt Haley's to sort of pour through information, but we are unique in having so much historical information about this problem consistently over the years published. So, but again, birds are flying into buildings all over the world, even out on the ocean, cruise ships, birds flying that are migrating over the ocean will fly into windows there.
May I ask a follow-up question, Kevin?
Absolutely.
So Keith, my presumption up to now has been that it's the cities or the buildings that are in the main migration sort of pathways. Does that mean, I don't know, Kansas City, this happens in sort of cities that are not on the main migration pathways as well?
Oh, yeah. There's migration happens on a broad front. It concentrates in certain places, and we call those flyways. But in between those areas, there's still migration occurring. And so these problems still occur in all those other areas. And then, of course, even when you're not talking about migratory periods, you're talking about summer and winter. During the summer, juvenile birds that are naive, you have a picture window at your house and there's some robins that have a nest in your yard and the juveniles wind up flying into your windows. Or during the winter, you have a bird feeder and there's juncos and white-throated sparrows and cardinals and other birds around, and they're not migrating anymore, but some of them wind up flying into your windows for various reasons. So this is a problem that can occur 12 months a year. And it just peaks during migration because that's when so many birds are coming through cities. They don't breed or winter there, but they're just passing through. And it's amazing when you go downtown, and Steve has reminded me of this, the number of ovenbirds that are walking around on sidewalks. There's no trees, there's no nothing. They're just walking around. They're everywhere. They will readily stop in cities. I remember once finding an ovenbird in the subway underground. It had gone down 2 flights of stairs and was rummaging around in the subway. So there are ovenbirds everywhere. There are common yellowthroats all over the place. It's amazing. They just will stop in cities in really urbanized areas at the drop of a hat. Rails will do this. We still don't understand what causes birds to make some of the choices they do, because there's some species, again, like Baltimore Orioles, we just never find them. I mean, I know of one, but they're just really differences between those species. So there's a lot to learn about how species are interpreting the built environment and utilizing it. But there are a lot of birds that do wind up landing in the middle of downtown Philadelphia on big migration days. They're everywhere. It's just amazing. Marsh wrens, all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't think would land there. They land there.
Yeah, that really makes you think, like, is the Baltimore really that smart, or do they fly at a different elevation, or do they, like, what is it? That's fat. That makes me almost want to go back and get my master's degree or something.
I love to tell people things like this, that there's so many things we still have to discover about birds, and all of us can be part of that. And we can't make any assumptions that we know it all. We know most of the stuff. There are still important discoveries that can be made about bird behavior that all of us can contribute to. So, always pay attention when you see something interesting. You might be looking at something that somebody else has not really paid attention to before.
That's pretty inspiring right there.
Yeah, Keith and Kevin, I wanted to share that for those of you that watch CBS Saturday morning, tomorrow morning, there's going to be a feature with Keith and Stephen and a profile of the work that's going on with the monitoring in Philadelphia. I think they've also interviewed some folks at the Academy of Natural Sciences that'll be part of the feature. We don't know what time it's going to be on during the CBS Saturday morning, but I believe, I don't want to misspeak, but I think it's from 7:30 to 9 that the program airs on CBS. So if you're interested in seeing some interviews of some of the monitors, Stephen and Keith and Jason at ANS, you'll get a chance to get a more insight at what they're doing 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, walking around the city, picking up dead birds, and it's worth seeing. It'll be a nice follow up to what you've learned tonight from Keith. I just want to share that before everybody we're ready to conclude the meeting. I think there's still time for other questions.
Yeah, I have two more comments here, but if you have any last minute questions, feel free to type them in the chat, but I'm sure Keith is approachable to emails if you have a question later. So we have a comment from Wendy. She says, excellent program, Keith. Thank you. Fascinating historical information.
Thanks, Wendy.
And then Sherry Kreider says, if you can, drive or go downtown to see the tall buildings with no lights on. It is very impressive. Only the clock is illuminated on City Hall. Love the old city pictures. Thank you, Keith.
Well,
Yeah,
we're
thank you, Sherry.
amazed too. It's really a lot of people that work very hard to make this happen, and we couldn't be more pleased with the participation in Lights Out.
I got it. Actually, I don't know. I don't remember what the date that they're going to end this, but I should do that. That's got to be a really interesting site. Thanks for sharing, Sherry. Barbara asks, what is your experience with the building managers? Are they participating in the effort, or did you get the impression they rather want to hide this as happening at their buildings?
Well, I know that Steve is on tonight, and I don't know if Steve would want to add a comment about that, but if he wants to, I defer to him.
The people I've dealt with have been very receptive, and I'm really surprised how they're on board and trying to help out. I think other people have found that same experience. Don Hawes of the BOMA has been very helpful. Even built a box for us that we can keep the injured birds to store them until we get them ready to transport. And I couldn't do this work without the help of all the custodian, the maintenance people at all the buildings. They all know me. I know their names. They have my phone number. They call me when they find a bird, and they save the birds for me. And so everyone is trying to, we can't resolve the situation because glass is a problem, but they're trying to help study the problem. And people have been very, very receptive.
Yeah, I think over the years, there's been a bunch of, awareness raising. And of course, last October 2nd, all the publicity, people were all aware of this. But I really have to give Steve credit. When Steve was participating in our original study between 2008 and 2011, and I had told people, don't talk to people too much about what you're doing. Just tell them that you're collecting the dead birds for the Academy of Natural Sciences. It's a scientific study, and that's it. Because I didn't want people to be spooked and feel that their buildings were under scrutiny, and we were going to report them to the bird police, and people were going to do stuff that was bad to them. And Steve took it upon himself to get to be friends with all of these people, and he got them to take him inside these buildings, to go up onto the sub-roofs of these buildings, and to start finding birds for him. And I just saw this as, this is Steve. He has a gift. And we have to be grateful for this. So the personality of the people who interact with them, the building managers, makes a big difference. There's many places and many things that you can do to mess that up, big time. And you have to be very sensitive to the potential to do that. And Steve was very careful to be cognizant of the opportunity to get more information and to work with these people, and that he's built these relationships. When I'm out with him, they're all waving to him. They all know him, and these relationships have been built over the years.
Things have changed. In 2008 to 2011, the police were called on me many times. People told me not to move, that the police detectives were coming to arrest me because they thought I was a terrorist, because I would take pictures of the buildings in the morning hours. And I tried to explain to them, and they were not interested. I remember a funny story. One time I was parked, you can park until 8 o'clock for free in front of Blue Cross. And I have a Scion XB, and I was trying to leave, and a car pulled up, and blocked me, wouldn't allow me to leave. And two guys got out and they came over me and they said, "Can we talk with you?" And well, when two big guys come up to you and say that, you know you're in trouble. So I said, "Sure, you can talk to me." And they said, "We got a report that you're a terrorist." And that because I was taking pictures early in the morning. But a funny ending to it, they said, anyone who drives a Scion XB couldn't be a terrorist. I don't know what that means, but.
Well,
So-
the important thing is Steve has never been arrested, and we have never ruined our relationship with any of these buildings. It's only improved. So
Yep.
these are the hurdles you have to go through as you do this work, but it's how you handle the hurdles that's the most important thing. And the outcome of the way he's handled them has been to build relationships that have really, profited us over the long term. And, there've been other things. I think the length of time that this has been talked about in Philadelphia and the articles that have appeared and so on has just saturated these people to the point where they realize there's a real problem here that needs to be addressed. And to their credit, we have good people that want to do the right thing.
I made friends with a lot of people at all the buildings. William Hall at 3 Logan Square. He has my phone number. He would call me when he would find a bird, and I would often thank him. And I remember one day thanking him, and he said, you don't have to thank me." He said, "I have grandchildren. I want them to be able to see these birds. We got to fix this problem." That was wonderful to hear that.
Yeah, I guess if I can comment, Stephen has been training other monitors too. People were shadowing him, till April 25th, Keith, kind of learning the ropes of how to monitor. And so we've grown the core of monitors with Steve's leadership. And then the other piece, Steve has given us a good bit of advice, like, the monitors need to have business cards to give to people. The brochures that you talked about are helpful to give to people. And then also beginning the work to, I think that at least for the spring, bird Philly badges, so people are recognized. And we hope to be working on some kind of vest and backpack that has the logo and makes people look like they're part of the Corps. That's really a great contribution of Stephen to help give us some guidance of what the monitors really need.
And Lee, thank you for designing that badge that we could wear. I could wear in my jacket and my backpack so people can identify us. It's really important. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just want to add, this is popped in my mind. I just want to add that, just in the last day or two, Steve has told me about another connection that he made that was partially through Mike Laferno, who's there with him.
Yeah.
And we now have a connection with the Kimmel Center.
Yes.
And we might be able to go there and monitor wherever we want. It's amazing. Just having the right connections with the right people and being there at the right time and saying the right things. Who is it at the Kimmel Center, the director of public relations?
Yeah. Woodward, what's your name?
Lauren Woodard, I think.
Yeah.
And
So
she's aware of all the glass and everything there, but they have access. There's subroofs and balconies and whatnot, and they all need to be checked because that's an impressive structure, but there's a lot of glass, as you know, and it's a lot of confusing reflections. So there's no telling what could be happening there.
Yeah, so but the important thing is how you deal with these opportunities and to be able to sort of, ingratiate yourself in the right way to these people. And then they say, "Oh, come and do whatever you want." It's just amazing. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do some investigations at the Kimmel Center. And as we're doing now at Independence National Historical Park, and two of the people that are helping us monitor, Ian and Stephanie, are on the call tonight. So thank you guys for the work you've been doing there.
We have to talk it up. I was talking to a union guy at Comcast, and he has seen me around, and then he told me a story, and he sent me a picture. It didn't arrive yet, but one of his coworkers on top of one of the Comcast buildings, he wasn't sure which one, that a falcon came and grabbed his hair, and I don't know what it was doing. And the guy looked up, and they got a picture of it. They have a video of it, and so he's going to send it to me. And so we have to. Everyone's interested. We have to make these connections, and this is a universal educational situation we're in. Most people are not aware of the problem. We have to talk it up continuously, nonstop, to everyone, and make this connection with everyone on the planet, because we have to educate people that if you're a bird, glass equals death. We have to learn to deal with it and try to resolve this issue.
Yeah. Well, Bird Safe Philly's existence really has given us an opportunity to build relationships with a whole group of people in Philadelphia in the business community that, us birders normally don't have discussions with.
Yes.
And so it's a very promising opportunity situation.
Yeah. BOMA has been very helpful to us.
Building Owners and Managers Association.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really inspiring to hear, because I didn't expect that. I guess most people wouldn't expect them to be willing to work with us, but Stephen figured out the approach. Don't, leave the pitchforks at home and build relationships. That's what this is all about. So that's truly inspiring, and I think a really good way to end the program. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Unless anyone has any more comments, I think we're good to close out.
Well,
on behalf of Wingcoat,
I just want to add one last thing.
Good.
No one organization was able to do this by themselves. This was because all of these groups came together, and every one of them contributed in a key way to make this possible. The Academy did things that I couldn't do. I mean, everybody was involved in helping this happen. So I think it's a lesson that those of us that are interested in the environment and birds, when we put aside our differences and try to find our commonalities and work as a team with other people and other groups, a lot can happen.
Yes, we need a partnership. I think I mentioned something before. Monitors are important. Collecting the data is very important. But if you collect dead birds and information, it's just sad stories. But having a team of Birds Safe Philadelphia who can use that information, so we can really change things. So it's really important for all these parts to work together to bring about change. And it is happening. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I agree. It's inspiring. So I don't think there's any more comments. On behalf of Wingcoat Audubon Society and all the partners, Lee, we appreciate you taking the time to present to us, and obviously all the hard work you're doing with all these great people. So thank you all. Happy birding tomorrow. And this weekend's probably the last of migration. So get out there and happy birding, and we'll see you all on June 4th, hopefully. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.